Recognizes the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Banks, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Carrillo, last week or 2 weeks ago, the House voted against a measure that would have tied the hands of the administration on our troop levels in Syria. I've been out of the room for a little bit. I don't know if you've already discussed this, but can you talk about what we're doing in Syria, why it's important, how many troops are there? Give us the full defense of our activities there.
Thanks, Congressman. So we're in Syria for the enduring defeat of ISIS. That is our daily mission. We are doing that through a partnered force called the Syrian Democratic Forces. And if I can talk about ISIS in Syria, we put them into 3 categories. The first one is ISIS at large. Those are the individuals that we are going after every day through our partnered forces. Last year we did 313 partnered ops in Iraq and Syria. This year we've done 129. They're in the lead. That same Syrian Democratic Force that was in Syria going after ISIS, they took over 10,000 killed, over 20,000 wounded going after ISIS, basically from 2014 until today. That is the ISIS at large that we see. Most of the ISIS very senior leadership, the leader, the Caliph, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, Abu Qureshi, those are the ones. They were basically commanding, controlling the ISIS global enterprise from northwest Syria and areas inside of Syria. We think we have contained ISIS in Syria, but the ideology is uncontained and unconstrained. The next category is ISIS in detention, and I call it an ISIS army in detention. There's over 10,000 ISIS detainees across 26 prisons that those are at risk. When we do our targeting inside of Syria, we go after those that are doing external operations or those that are trying to break that army out of prison. If they were to get out, there's approximately 2,000 ISIS is our estimate in Syria. You would 5 times more the size of what they currently have. And lastly, it's the potential for the next generation of ISIS in Al-Hol and Al-Rosh camps. I was in these camps 2 weeks ago. I've been to Syria 6 times, and I was in that detention facility in HASC. That's why we are there, is to go after the enduring defeat of ISIS.
So would you quantify the troops who are in Syria as special operations troops? What types of personnel do we have there?
Every kind, Congressman. We have special operations forces, we have National Guard, and we have active duty.
Yeah, and can you quantify the troop level again of
it's 900, but it goes plus or minus on that based on we have to bring up a temporary enabling force because of that, and also when you do what we call a relief in place transfer of authority, those numbers go up. So when we bring in based on a capability that we want to bring, it's called temporary enabling, much like we brought Bradley fighting vehicles in for a temporary period of time, that you'll see those numbers will go up. And I think for the return on investment you get for that very small force, what you are seeing is really the containment of ISIS in Syria right now.
Okay, I appreciate the overview of why we're there. Tell us what would happen if we weren't there. And maybe perhaps Afghanistan is a parallel example. If you removed troops, then what happens if we leave Syria?
It is my commander's estimate and my intel analysts that if we were to leave Syria and if the SDF could not fight the ISIS by themselves, you could see a breakout of the prisons. You could see the radicalization inside Al-Hol, and it is our estimate that ISIS would return in 1 to 2 years. Again, there's no military solution for Syria. It's going to take a whole of government approach. When you look at the detainees, when you look at the IDPs that are in Al-Hol, we need to repatriate them, rehabilitate, and reintegrate them back into their countries of origin.
How important is it to protect the Omar oil fields? What would happen if we weren't there? Would ISIS take over the oil fields?
I think if we weren't there, I mean, we're not there to protect the oil fields. We're there for the enduring defeat of ISIS. I think you would see either the Wagner forces that are along the Dar es River, or you'd see Russian forces or Syrian forces going there. If you remember back in 2018, Wagner, a very large force of Wagner, tried to go and actually attack the U.S. forces and our Syrian partners, the Syrian Democratic Forces, and they understood what American firepower can do, and we killed over 300 of them.
What about the ISIS threat to Israel? If we pulled out, what would that? What could potentially occur vis-a-vis Israel from a threat from Syria?
What we see with ISIS in Syria, that is an area where they do try and do their external ops. That's why we target the external operations. ISIS Sinai is probably a bigger threat where they try and go across, and then there's the ISIS really in the Levant. But from a Syria standpoint, that's where they do their command and control from at the highest levels.
Mr. Chairman, I'm glad I voted the way that I did a couple of weeks ago. With that, I yield back.